Have you ever stopped to wonder what you're really made of? I don't mean in some deep philosophical way. I mean literally. What are the actual physical building blocks that make up, well, you? Today, we're going to take a journey deep inside into the microscopic world that exists within every one of us. Go ahead, take a look at your hand. Seems pretty solid, right? You use it every single day. But what you see is just the surface. We're about to dive deep, peel back the layers, and find out what's really going on inside. So let's ask that question. What is your hand really made of? If we had a super-powered microscope and could just keep zooming in, past the skin, past anything you can see, what would we find? What are the true, fundamental pieces that make up this incredible, living thing at the end of your arm? Okay, our journey starts right at the surface. We're going to zoom in, taking a trip from your skin, the organ you see every day, all the way down to the tiny individual cells that build it. Ready? Let's go. You know, it's kind of like a set of Russian nesting dolls. Your hand is an organ, and it's covered in skin. That skin is made of tissues, and those tissues are really just communities of cells all working together. And then, inside those cells, that's where you find the most basic components of all, the molecules. That's the path we're taking today, from the outside all the way in. See, our bodies aren't just a loose bag of cells floating around. Nope, they're highly organized into tissues. And what holds them together are these amazing little protein structures called desmosomes. Just think of them as molecular rivets that stick cells to each other, creating these strong, connected layers like our skin. And that brings us right down to the main event, the molecular level. These tiny, tiny structures are the true foundation, not just of your hand, but of pretty much all living things. This is where the magic really happens. Now, here's something that might blow your mind. About 75 to 80% of you by weight is just small molecules. And the most common one of all? It's just plain old water. Seriously, water is the stage where all of life's chemistry plays out. To put that in perspective, if you weigh 150 pounds, about 112 of those pounds are nothing but water. So if we're mostly made of small molecules, how does a cell build all the big, complex things it needs? Well, it has a really clever strategy. It takes small individual units, which we call monomers, and it links them together into these long, long chains called polymers. It's kind of like taking a huge pile of single Lego bricks, the monomers, and clicking them together to build a giant castle, the polymer. And in the world of biology, there are three main types of these big molecules, these macromolecules. You've got polysaccharides, which come from sugars and give us energy. Then you have proteins, which are made from amino acids. And finally, you've got nucleic acids, built from things called nucleotides. Let's zoom in on proteins first, because they are fascinating. You know, if a cell was a bustling city, proteins would be the workers doing, well, pretty much every job you can imagine. They are the absolute workhorses of life. And I really do mean every job. Proteins are speeding up chemical reactions, they're forming the cell's internal skeleton, they're hauling materials around, they're powering movement, they're sending signals. They even control which genes get turned on and off. Their versatility is just staggering. So what's their secret? How can one type of molecule do so many different things? It all comes down to shape. Every protein folds itself into a very specific, unique, three-dimensional structure. And that shape determines its job. It's everything. A protein's shape is its function, whether it's shaped to carry oxygen, like hemoglobin, or to fight off viruses, like an antibody. In biology, form and function are two sides of the same coin. But hold on, how does a cell know which proteins to build in the first place? And how does it know how to fold them into the right shape? For that, we have to go to the head office, to the master blueprint, the nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. And here it is, DNA. It's one of nature's most beautiful and ingenious creations. The best way to think about it is like a giant cookbook, and it contains every single recipe needed to build and operate you, an entire organism. And believe it or not, all of those recipes are written in a simple four-letter alphabet, A, T, C, and G. Now, the two strands of that famous double helix are complementary. They fit together perfectly, like two sides of a zipper. And the rule is super simple. A on one side always pairs up with T on the other, and C always zips together with G. This simple, elegant rule is the whole secret to how DNA can be copied perfectly, over and over again.
Okay, so to use a recipe from the giant DNA cookbook, the cell can't just take the whole book to the kitchen. Instead, it makes a temporary copy of just one recipe or one gene. This process is called transcription. A little segment of the DNA is rewritten into a similar molecule called messenger RNA or mRNA. It's exactly like photocopying a single page out of a massive encyclopedia. That mRNA copy, that photocopy, then leaves the library and heads out to the cell's factory floor. There, this amazing molecular machine called a ribosome latches on and reads the message. We call this step translation. The ribosome reads the code on the mRNA and translates it, step by step, into a specific chain of amino acids. And just like that, it builds a protein. So you see the flow? The information is stored permanently in the DNA inside the nucleus. It gets transcribed into a temporary mRNA message. That message then gets translated into a protein that goes off and does a job. This flow of information from DNA to RNA to protein is so fundamental it's often called the central dogma of molecular biology. It's the core process of life.
But wait a second. All this building and copying and transcribing and translating, all this work requires a ton of energy. So where does the cell get the power to do all of this? Turns out it comes from one single universal molecule. I'd like you to meet adenosine triphosphate, or just ATP for short. You can think of this as the official energy currency for pretty much all life on Earth. Whenever a cell needs to get something done, it has to spend some ATP. Probably the best way to think about ATP is like a tiny rechargeable battery. When your cells break down food, they use the energy from that food to charge up a molecule of ADP, turning it into a high-energy ATP. Then, whenever a part of the cell needs power, it just breaks a chemical bond in that ATP, which releases a burst of energy to get the job done. That turns it back into ADP, which is now ready to go get recharged all over again. And what kind of work are we talking about? Oh, just about everything. Building all those DNA, RNA, and protein molecules we just discussed, that costs ATP. Contracting your muscles? ATP. Pumping things in and out of your cells? You guessed it, ATP. Even the firing of the nerves in your brain is powered by ATP. Life would literally grind to a halt without it. So, there you have it. We started with something as familiar as our own hand, and we journeyed all the way down into the molecular world. We met the proteins that do all the work, the DNA that holds all the instructions, and the ATP that provides all the power. It's this beautiful, complex, and totally interconnected system. And all of that leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to chew on. Think about this. Every single cell in your body, from a neuron in your brain to a cell in your big toe, contains the exact same DNA blueprint, the same giant cookbook. So how does a liver cell know to be a liver cell and not a stem cell? How does it know which recipes to read? Something to think about, isn't it?